the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Nissen, and today my very special guest is Sarah Penner. Sarah, welcome to the show. Why don't you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Yes, thank you, Allison. So my name is Sarah Penner. I am the debut author of the Lost Apothecary, which comes out on March 2nd, 2021 with Park Row Books, an imprint of HarperCollins. And the Lost Apothecary is historical fiction, but I also like to say that it's got a little bit of mystery and magical realism thrown in. It's also dual timeline. So it takes place in 18th century London and present day. And it is about a female apothecary poisoner in 18th century London who dispenses well-disguised poisons to women seeking vengeance on the men who have wronged them. So I mentioned that this is my debut novel. I write at strange hours of the day because I also work full-time in finance. I've been in the corporate world for more than 12 years, and I'm very much a early morning writer. I tend to wake up at 5 or 5:30 and write for a couple of hours before I have to log into work. And I live in St. Petersburg, Florida with my husband and our miniature dachshund, Zoe.
Well, it sounds like you have a big balancing act on your hands.
I do, yes. It's a lot of juggling, but just the way that I am kind of naturally, I like to be busy and I get bored very easily and I need constant mental stimulation. So it's funny when I do force myself to take a day off or even a few days off, unless I'm actively on a vacation or hiking or seeing new places, I find myself just kind of wanting something to read or work on or write. So it works well for now that I kind of have this personal endeavor with my books, but then also have to log in and work for a business every day. It's been a lot of balancing for sure for many years, but I think that it works well with, my personality type.
So your book is about a pharmacist. And
yep. An apothecary is kind of the predecessor to our modern day pharmacist. But there's much less science that, an apothecary in the 18th century would have put into her remedies, we could say.
And she is out to, I guess, right the wrongs of her broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
And she uses poisons to do that. So did you have to do a lot of research about that?
So you're exactly right that she's helping women seek vengeance via poisonous remedies that they can easily slip into wines or food or, I don't want to spoil some of the unique remedies that are dispensed in the story. But as for the research, I don't have any kind of medical or scientific background whatsoever. I have a very elementary knowledge of a few essential oils, probably like most women have in their toiletry, shelf in their bathroom. But for this book, I did have to do an extensive amount of research, and that really focused on two different areas. The first component was poisoning and the types of poisons that would have been used in both the 18th century and the 19th century. And then the other element of the research was a lot of herbal ingredients. So many of them or most of them are not poisonous. And so I learned about all different sorts of plants and just herbs and different things that real apothecaries used when they were trying to heal or help people. Much of, that is what we see today, whether it's calming agents like chamomile, anti-inflammatories like turmeric. I mean, a lot of the stuff that a lot of us have in our kitchens or our bathrooms today, those remedies have been around for hundreds of years. So there was a lot of research. I learned a lot about poisons, probably more than my husband is comfortable with. but it was a really fascinating research, and there's a lot of interesting information out there about what people used to poison other people with.
It sounds like you had a nice education on healing as well, if you were talking about turmeric and
Yep.
anti-inflammatory. So have you been able to incorporate some of those into your own diet now?
It's funny you ask that. No one has asked me that before. I'm a healthy person just anyways. I try to on weekdays eat clean, real whole food. And so I think a lot of the things that are good for people and always have been are probably in, my kitchen or diet anyways. So it's kind of funny. There's not really anything new that I didn't know about that is really good for you, that I've now incorporated into my own lifestyle. But there are just so many. If you open your own spice drawer and just kind of Google the effects of a lot of what's in a spice drawer, like cinnamon and a lot of curries, like so much of that, those are chemicals. At the end of the day, everything that you eat and put in your body is a chemical, and it can either work for you or work against you. And that theme is mentioned a couple of times in my book. So yeah, I think that would be a fun thing for listeners. Just go open your spice drawer and Google a couple of the ingredients and see what it can do to you.
Great advice. I think I'm going to go try that. Well, what has surprised you most about your publishing journey?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty daunting industry, and I knew that going into this. Obviously, when you're pursuing publication, especially with one of the big five publishers, there's just so much power and money behind these organizations, and especially debut authors can often feel a little bit left behind. And so I was prepared for what I felt was going to be a pretty intimidating, if not scary, experience. But I think what has really surprised me is how utterly warm and welcoming and open the entire industry has been. And I mean, not just my publisher and my editorial team, but my agent and her agency, the writing community, whether published authors or unpublished authors. And very early in the life cycle of publishing a book, one of the things that we seek are blurbs. And generally you want to get blurbs from well-known authors because that's going to carry more clout. And that was kind of my first foray into like asking essentially for favors from really well-known published authors. And I was just astounded how many of them responded to that and reached out to me personally and read my book and said, anything we can do to help you in 2020, which is like the worst year ever, let us know. And I've just found everyone is so much warmer and more welcoming than I anticipated. And that also goes for booksellers and librarians and reviewers. I think that I was just prepared for more intimidation, I guess. And it's just really been such a welcoming community to join.
How did you come up with the theme for your book?
Yeah, so there is something known as mudlarking, which is a pastime, very popular in London. It's over the last few years, it's sort of grown in popularity, and it essentially means scrounging around in the river for interesting or valuable artifacts. And several years ago, I received a book of pictures, and it was artifacts that different mudlarkers had found on the River Thames in London. And I adore the city of London and knew I wanted to set a book there. And I had this sort of idea of a woman apothecary who dispensed poisons. And when I was looking at this book of mudlarking artifacts, it just sort of dawned on me that's going to be the first scene in my book, is a present day woman is going to find an old apothecary vial in the river while mudlarking. And that's going to be the first clue that puts her on the trail of uncovering this never solved apothecary serial killer, basically. So there were a few different seeds of ideas, which I think a lot of authors say that there maybe wasn't one moment of inspiration, but this convergence of several moments of inspiration. But I just remember very clearly sitting in this chair over the holidays at my mother-in-law's house and looking through this book of artifacts. And I thought, that's it. That's my first scene. And for me personally, once I have that first scene, I'm often off to the races at that point.
That's fascinating. I absolutely love the idea that you are able to take an artifact, just one simple thought, one idea, and blossom it into an entire novel.
Yep.
Is this the first novel that you've written, or was there something else that came before it?
There was something else that came before it. It was never agented, never published. It was also historical fiction that took place in London. However, I queried very widely, and any of your listeners who have been in the querying trenches know this very well, this experience. But I queried more than 100 agents, both in the US and the UK, and I got rejected just over and over. And a couple of people gave me feedback, and it was all very similar. And so I took that to heart. And the feedback was basically that the women in my story did not have agency. There were things happening to them, but they weren't driving forward their own narrative, and they weren't making things happen in their own story. So when I set out to write The Lost Apothecary, I had that front of mind, and I wanted all of the women, because I have 3 point of view characters. I have my present day woman who's in London, I have my apothecary, and then there's also a 12-year-old girl in 18th century London. So I've got these 3 women, and I wanted all of them to just very much be in control of their own destiny and approach every situation very, not necessarily confidently, but I wanted them to be the people driving forward each scene. And that the interesting thing is, not only did The Lost Apothecary really resonate with agents and editors alike, but so many people have said they think it's a feminist book, and they love how in control the women are of their own fates. And that's really a theme that kind of is through the entire story. So I think it's a good lesson learned for anyone who's listening that wants to write a book, or maybe has written a book and hasn't gotten much traction and they don't know why. I would ask yourself whether your characters are making things happen, or whether things just keep happening to them that they end up responding to. I think it's a good reflection for all of us who are writers.
So did you have to add a lot of backstory?
So I did, particularly when I was working on revisions with my agent, who's very editorial. And then again, when I went through subsequent passes with my editor. So my natural style of writing, I love plotting and I love plot twists. And sometimes I actually think that I should have tried my hand at like contemporary thrillers, because a lot of thrillers in today's market are pretty light on characterization and very heavy on just suspense and plotting. And that's my favorite thing to write. But unfortunately, in commercial fiction, your editorial team and your readers they want both. They want a really compelling, masterful plot, but they also want well-developed characters. And that's where I am so grateful to my agent and to my editor, because they helped extract that out of me. So I think it was always there. I just don't enjoy putting it on the page as much about someone's old emotional injury that might be driving them to do what they're doing today, or someone's goals and aspirations that they couldn't ever achieve. I just don't find that as fun to write about as cliffhangers at the end of a chapter where someone is standing, literally like at the edge of a cliff about to make a decision. So I think that's when it's important to have good beta readers, good critique readers. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if you're seeking traditional publication, you've got a good agent, and then a good editor. And those are the people who are going to help hone in on the areas that you're maybe not as developed in as you grow in your writing career.
So are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am about 80% pantser, but I can't really kick off a first draft until I have a few bones of the story. And I actually was just giving a presentation on this for the Florida Writers Association last week. And the few bones that I have to have before I start writing, I obviously have to know the who and the where and the when. Like who's my character, what's their name, what's their profession, when are they living, and where. And then I like to know the inciting incident, because that's going to happen pretty early in your book. And then I like to know the conflict and the stakes. I don't need to know the ending. In fact, with the several different projects I've worked on, I never know the ending really until I get going. Um, and, I don't need to know much of the subplots or the full character arc. I think all of that comes in during revisions, but I do have to know, like, what's that first inciting incident or discovery, and then what are the stakes? Like, why does this story matter? And as a reader, I often find that books, the stakes aren't high enough for my personal preference. I like really big stakes. So in The Lost Apothecary, the stakes are that so many thousands of women across the city of London have sought advice and help from this apothecary, and their names are written in her register of poisons. And so if that register gets found by the police, the names of all of these women poisoners are going to be exposed, and then their livelihood is all at risk. So I loved that. I really wanted to build up those stakes early on, and I think it makes for a really interesting read.
So, what advice do you have for somebody who is just in the beginning stages of looking for an agent?
Yeah, there's a few things. One of the things I'm so glad that I did very early on was develop a platform. And what I mean by that is a very rudimentary website. It doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to be expensive. There are tons of free solutions out there, but a website, because when you start querying, the very first thing that agent is going to do if they like your query letter is they're going to hop over to Google and they're going to type your name in. And you want a nice looking website to come up. Another piece of the platform that's really important, in my personal opinion, is some sort of social media presence. And I know that a lot of people are anti-social media, and I agree, it's definitely got its shortcomings, but we live in 2020, and if someone doesn't have any online presence, it's just it's going to give your agent it's going to look strange, because the reality is when you're promoting a book, that's so many different readers and reviewers and bloggers that you're going to be able to reach through those platforms as well. So if you can go into the querying experience with some of that in place, you're already that far ahead. So I think that's my first piece of advice, is start your platforms early, long before you're querying. I will say also this: when the week that I was querying The Lost Apothecary, I was watching my website analytics, and they were just lighting up. I could tell, like, to the minute and in what state the agents were that were opening up my website. So it was like very obvious to me that as soon as they were reading my query, they were Googling me. So that was really good evidence. Another thing that I would recommend querying writers do is connect with people who are in the same situation as you, whether they're drafting or revising and querying, because you're probably going to end up kind of growing up in your writing career with a lot of these people. So my two critique readers that I work really closely with, I met one of them on Twitter because we have a shared love of 18th century London. And I met one of them at a conference, and our publishing paths have, like, very serendipitously kind of progressed at the same rate. And I see this all the time. I've got two very good writer friends who met many years ago at a conference. They queried and got agented at the exact same time. They got their publishing deals at the exact same time, and their books are coming out the exact same month. So it's like the universe kind of tries to steer you with like-minded people. So I think just be open to connecting with other writers. And then I think my last piece of advice, and I try and just live by these two words, but it's be brave. So I know a lot of writers who I think they're ready to pull the trigger, but it's such a scary thing to finally send that first query out And I understand the hesitation, but if you've sought feedback from beta readers and you feel in your gut like your manuscript is ready, there comes a day where you have to just be brave and do it. And I just would hate to see people's writing careers stall or not advance as quickly as they could because they haven't been able to yet take that leap. And so I think being brave is just really important. And also with your writing, it's important to be brave. And you don't have to write the same book that's selling and that everyone else is writing. Like there's always going to be someone at the leading edge who's going to write something really new and different. So I think of Stu Turton, his debut novel, which is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, was like no novel that anyone has ever read, a huge bestseller, and he made his career off of that one book. And so it's things like that where I just think he was so brave to even query that manuscript, and look how far it's gotten him. So we all need to, in our own way, just do the scary thing.
Such great advice, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing that. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes. So to my earlier point about social media, I'm on all social media platforms. Just type in Sarah Penner and I will be the first or second to come up. And then also sarahpenner.com, and Sarah has an H on it. So that's my website, and there's a contact page there with all of my contact information, my newsletter sign up, a little message box if you want to message me that way. And I do try, at least right now, to respond to every email that I get. I can't make that promise forever, but right now it's manageable. So I love when some of the early readers of The Lost Apothecary have popped in and said hi. It's been very fun to interact with them. So I'm definitely not hard to find online.
All right. And Sarah, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Yes, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right. What was your favorite song when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, I'm not a huge pop culture person, but I love the Beatles' best hits. So maybe I'll say like Hey Jude. I can distinctly remember in junior high, like standing in my living room and singing that song when no one was home.
If you could travel anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go?
I would go to, I would probably go to the Amalfi Coast of Italy.
Beautiful. I haven't been there, but that is also on my bucket list. And if you were going to meet any famous celebrity, who would it be?
I would just love to, I would love to sit down and have a drink with probably Leonardo DiCaprio. I think that he is a phenomenal actor and brilliant writer and producer, and I would just love to meet him.
Well, that sounds like quite an experience. If you have it, get back to us and let us know how it turns out.
I will, for sure.
Thank you so much, Sarah Penner, for stopping by.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Allison.
You all have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. Allison out. Sarah Penner is the debut author of The Lost Apothecary, forthcoming in March 2021 from Park Row Books. Sarah grew up in Northeast Kansas in a small log cabin nestled deep in the woods. She began writing seriously in 2015 after attending a moving lecture given by Elizabeth Gilbert. She's an avid traveler, a graduate of the University of Kansas, and has spent the last decade in various corporate finance functions. She loves her day job, numbers and spreadsheets. When she's not writing, you'll find her in the kitchen, the yoga studio, or running outdoors in the Florida heat. For more information on Sarah, visit her website at sarahpenner.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us on the web at floridawriters.net.